coming tonight, and glad it's not 20 below and windy and 4 feet of snow, but as you know, we had to reschedule from last week, so I'm very pleased that you all took the time to come out to join us tonight. We're going to be talking about a very important topic. Our goals for tonight are going to be to review the bullying law, to understand both the legal requirements and the expectations that are set for schools by the Department of Education, and for all of us to become more familiar with the new district policy, how that plays out, and to hopefully have everyone leave with a better understanding of what bullying really is. Back in May of 2012, the Maine legislature passed into law an act to prohibit bullying and cyberbullying in schools. It was PL 659. And the Maine educational statute states prohibition on bullying in public schools. The law recognizes that bullying behavior must be addressed to ensure student safety in an inclusive learning environment. In August of 2016, the Maine Department of Education Commissioner revised the model policy to include comprehensive, detailed, and user-friendly forms that are now part of our policy. This past fall, MSAD 44 School Board revised and adopted a new policy that helps the district meet that requirement. I think, as we all know, if you are a parent, grandparent, interested community member, and you watch TV or you read the newspaper, bullying is a significant concern in every school district, in every town, in every state in the United States. What I think we're all focused on here, though, is what does it mean in SAD 44, and how can we, together, wearing the same uniform, take a positive and proactive approach about addressing this in a way that benefits our kids, our schools, and our community as a whole. Moving forward with this new policy is providing us with some new kinds of guidance that we haven't necessarily had before, and we're hopeful that you will see that as being a very positive step. Hopefully you've had a chance to go online and see our policy and the different forms and procedures that are accompany that. Our goal for tonight will be for all of us to leave this meeting with a more complete understanding of what bullying really is. And hopefully, at the end of the day, to create a unified effort that will result in better opportunities for our kids and our community as a whole. To accomplish that, it's going to require everybody in this room working together to make sure that that can take place. We'll have several presenters tonight, and they're going to include district administrators. Mark Kenny, I'm just going to go down the row here. Mark Kenny, who is the middle school principal. Jess Wilkie, who is the Woodstock teaching principal. Elaine Ferlin, who is the Crescent Park School principal. Kristen Dayco, our Dean of Students at the high school. Cheryl Lang, who's the principal of the high school. Kathleen Collins, who's our special education director. And Ron Deegan, who is our transportation director. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Dave Murphy, I'm the superintendent. I started putting this together, I want to know, back in September or October before the policies were finally approved, and just assembling all the pieces. We thought we had it all set, like I said, for last week, and then Mother Nature didn't cooperate. Unfortunately, we also had another presenter who's not going to be able to be with us tonight. She contacted us about an hour ago. Her daughter actually is in labor, and she thought she was still going to be able to make it until her daughter's son broke his leg. And with the mom being in labor, Grandma had to take the little boy to the hospital. So you probably can all identify with things like that. But that was Melissa Huey. Melissa is a spark plug. She's a great person. She's an attorney from Drummond and Woodsum. She has contributed to the PowerPoint, but she will not be able to be with us tonight because of that, and she asked me to just pass on that on her behalf and say that she was sorry she couldn't make it. The other person that we do have here tonight that we're very pleased could join us is Sarah Ricker. Sarah is a student assistance coordinator with the Maine Department of Education, and we really appreciate her making the trek over here from Augusta this afternoon. Sarah's responsibilities at the DOE include overseeing school climate including student behavior, and she's also the primary contact at the DOE for school guidance counselors. Sarah is responsible for ensuring school compliance with the bullying prevention in Chapter 33 restraint laws, and overall she's the contact for parents and schools around any non-academic student conduct. Through the Maine DOE's website and workshops out in the field, Sarah provides a wide range of professional development opportunities, technical assistance, and information relating to bullying prevention, restraint and seclusion law, and positive and safe school climates. So I've had several interactions with Sarah. I have found her to be extremely helpful and knowledgeable, and felt that she would be a very positive part of a presentation that we could make to the community. Certified K-8 teacher, she's also had some interesting experiences along the way. She's been a Title I educator, special education ed tech, a classroom teacher, an assistant principal, athletic director, teacher incentive fund coordinator, as well as a 21st Century Community Learning Center coordinator. She earned her bachelor's degree in human ecology at the College of the Atlantic in Bar Harbor, and she completed her master's in education and educational leadership at the University of Maine in Farmington. What we'd like to do tonight is to go through the presentation that these folks have put together, which will again talk a little bit about the law, a little bit about the state requirements, and also about the school district policy and how our administrators go about implementing that policy and the process that they use to make determinations about whether a case is bullying or not. What we'd like to do is go through the entire presentation. We will leave some time at the end if you have any questions, and we'll be happy to take the time to address those. So again, I just want to thank you for taking the time to come tonight, and I hope you find this evening's presentation to be both useful and informational. And again, when we all head out of here tonight, I hope we can head out basically wearing the same uniform and working together to ensure that we can do a good job with protecting our kids. I think too often we turn on the TV, we see horrible things happening across the country as a result of bullying behaviors. We don't want to see that happening anywhere in SAD 44. So thanks again, and at this point I am going to introduce Sarah. And again, welcome her, and thank you again, Sarah, for joining us. Okay. Before she comes up and takes the mic, I made about 35 or so full copies of the JICK policy, which is the SAD 44 bullying policy, as well as all the attached forms. I only wanted to kill so many trees. Sorry, Don. But I'm going to put these up back, so if these interest you, you can grab one on the way out. Okay.
I'll emphasize again, thank you for being here tonight. I'm really happy to be here. This is the second time I've been in this position for 2 years now. The district has called me to interact with parents, and parents are my favorite, so I'm glad to be here tonight. This is not an easy topic to talk about, and it's hard because it affects your kid. And we all know that your kid is your number one, and even though he listed off a whole bunch of things I've done, I have 4 kids at home, so I get this, and we can definitely have great conversations and work together on this. So even though Dave mentioned questions at the end, if you have a question while I'm talking, just please raise your hand, and I'm happy to address it. So you all have these handouts in front of you. If you don't, raise your hand and Dave will bring you a copy of the handouts. But you have all these slides in front of you. So what we're just going to go over today, we're going to just go over behavior. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Go over the law, go over the policy and procedures that the law defines that have to be in place, and then the administrators will speak. So talking about behavior. So we have bullying and harassment sometimes are talked of in the same sentence or in the same situation. And just a little history, back when Angus King was governor, he put together what was called the Maine Children's Cabinet, and in the work that they did in recognizing, supports we need for kids, for students, that was the beginning of this law, saying we need to put laws in place to address bullying and harassment in our schools. So since then, we kind of pulled bullying out a little bit because we recognize it as a specific behavior we should be talking about. So when we're talking about harassment, this is mostly directed at things that would be civil rights related. Gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, ancestry, and harassment gets to a point too where legal measures come into play. And one distinguishing difference between bullying and harassment is if there's harassing behavior, that sometimes has a number to it. Usually it's a warning to the party who is being the harasser, and a communication between both parties to stop, and what's going to be put in place in order for the possibility of it to stop. And then if it happens like 3 more times, yes, there is a number to it, then the legal side comes in, the police come involved. Bullying does not have any number to it. There is no, it has to happen 3 times, it has to happen 6 times. It can be a one-time occurrence. Some of our definitions say repeated behavior, but just know that it can be a one-time thing. And that's information I give to administrators when I'm doing training, so when they're working with a family or working with students, that they know that. And then there's behavior that's just not friendly. It's just not good. It's behavior that either consciously someone's choosing to be mean and hurtful, or maybe they said something or looked a certain way that the receiver of that thought it was mean and hurtful. So the person who did that behavior that's mean or hurtful either needs to be told that it was wrong and to stop doing it, or needs to be told it was wrong, you need to stop doing it, and this is how you can stop doing it, because they may not have those social skills yet to do that. So recognizing that sometimes there's behavior out there that just, it doesn't feel good and in the end to either party, but it's certainly behavior that can be worked through, and understanding sometimes both parties and where that's coming from, and we want to feel like that. This is Maine's definition of bullying. It's in your handout, and I also put it on the last page so you can see it better instead of looking at the little words on the screen. You can go to lots of places and find the definition of bullying. You will see power imbalance, you will see repeated behavior, you will see the word violence in some of those definitions. While all those definitions, they aren't wrong, when a school is looking at a situation where the students are exhibiting that bullying behavior in a school-sponsored activity or a school building, the administrators want to align that behavior that they're seeing to this definition. And it's also good for parents to know this definition too, because it's consistent language. So if you're feeling as though your child is in a hostile situation at school, you know that's in the definition. And knowing that language, the administrators knowing that language, that gives you a beginning point for that discussion, like, this is what I think it is. And then the investigation would carry out whether or not that behavior is aligned with the definition. So the definition kind of has 3 parts to it. One has to do with physical harm or fear of physical harm. Another part is interfering with the student's rights because of that intimidating or hostile environment, and it's interfering with their rights essentially to an education, to access their academic programming. That doesn't just mean sitting in math class. It could be they don't want to try out for a sports team, or they don't want to be in the drama club, or they don't want to go on a particular field trip because of this bullying behavior that's happening. And then the third part to it is based on the civil rights thing. So now you're probably thinking, well, there's that harassment piece that you said was kind of separate from the bullying. So it is still part of it. So knowing that. So if it does get to that part of the definition, now you're looking at bullying and potential harassment as well. You do not have to have all three of those checked off in order to define it as behavior in one of those three pieces to it. So one reason for sharing this, it gives common language amongst everyone involved in the situation to talk about the behavior. And it also shows that this is the definition of bullying that we're talking about here in Maine when it talks about our school. So if you see another definition, that's good information to have, but again, this will help us to remediate a situation that comes up. Melissa wanted to share this excerpt from the book, The Bullied and the Bystander. Talk about, teasing. What does that look like? And maybe teasing isn't a word that you may hear a lot in high school, or maybe in a middle school or elementary school, knowing that this can happen across the spectrum. But as I was looking at this, as she was talking to me about the slide, again, it falls back to some social skills, some understanding, be able to read body language. Are you laughing about it? Is the recipient laughing because they're embarrassed by what was said? Are they laughing because it was funny? Are they laughing to avoid, a potential situation where now they're going to be made fun of even more? So talking about this, with your child, talking about this in guidance classes, what does this look like? I'll just read through them quickly. Allows the teaser and the person teased to swap roles with ease. Isn't intended to hurt the other person. Maintains the basic integrity of everyone involved, meant to get both parties to laugh. Is only a small part of the activity shared by those involved. And is discontinued when someone becomes upset. So again, it's the social skills, working through those. But are they laughing because it is funny, or are they laughing because it's not so funny? Makes us a taunting. Imbalance of power, one-sided. Again, some definitions of bullying will call this as an imbalance of power, but the main definition does not. Taunting is intended to harm. Humiliating, cruel, demeaning, or bigoted comments. Laughter directed at the target, but not with the target. Diminish the sense of self-worth. It continues especially when the targeted person becomes distressed or objects. So now we have taunting in there, which is behavior that is certainly not desirable. But as we look at our Maine's definition of bullying, and as we look at this, maybe there are some things we can see that are similar. Is the taunting leading to bullying? Is the taunting something that can simply be called taunting, and that's we're going to address it as that as opposed to bullying. Again, having this understanding and this knowledge of what these are will help with that conversation when you're talking about the behavior that's harming your child, or behavior that you're seeing happening that you want to talk about. So Maine's law, the reason we have Maine's bullying law written the way it is, and I'll get into more detail, is we obviously recognizing the behavior. We don't want this behavior happening in our schools, and we know why we don't want it happening in our schools, but also at the same time we want this behavior to change to a positive. So when this law was put in place, it gave guidance to schools and to families that we're going to not penalize and give punitive measures to those who are determined to have bullied, but we want to change that behavior. So schools will look at this sometimes as we're not going to suspend or expel, but we're going to put some alternative discipline measures in place in order to change the behavior from it happening again. Because no matter who you are and what you have done, being suspended, expelled, pushed away from your social group, pushed away from your world, for kids, school is their world, isn't always the best place to learn how to change your behavior. So schools working with kids and working with families to change that. So the law says that the districts have to establish policies and procedures consistent with the DOE model policy. And SAD 44 has done so. And what's unique about this law, and most laws in Maine, it doesn't have the Department of Education creating policies, but this one does. And what makes it great about that is that those who created this policy were myself, it was a superintendent, a principal, a school counselor, a parent was involved, Brandon Baldwin, who does our civil rights team projects across the state, Stan Davis, who's nationally recognized for bullying prevention efforts. Those were the people, real people who were involved in creating this policy, and they brought their experiences of working in schools, working with families, and working with students directly who, hurtful behavior, put this work together. And the outcome was to give tools to schools that they could use to change the behavior of bullying. So just know that this policy and procedure, there's a lot of work and effort that went behind it for schools to adopt. The policy must be shared with students and parents and volunteers, administrators, teachers, and staff. All of those people must be aware of this policy. Policy should be on the website, it should be in handbooks, and it should be readily available like it is tonight. Substantiated incidents are addressed, so I kind of talked about that as the purpose of the law. We want to change that behavior. The reason the word substantiated is used is because when an initial report comes in of bullying, in looking at it, doing the investigation, it may be that it wasn't bullying, it was some other type of behavior that's going to be addressed. So if it's not bullying, then it wasn't a substantiated incident. So a substantiated incident would mean, yep, we did our investigation, all the details and lining up to the definition tells us it's substantiated. And then training is provided to staff. Districts provide that, and it can, there's no real confinement to what that training looks like, as opposed to lots of other trainings that the DOE requires that districts do. So that training can be unique to that district. What are that district's specific needs that they need to know? Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a question about the substantiation of an incident. Who determines that? Is that just the administration? Does that include the parents involved? The superintendent? Who makes that determination?
Sure. So that's one of the very, it's an 8-page procedure in the policy and procedure form, and how it gets to that investigation is that initial report comes in. I've been bullied, my child's been bullied, and the principal does an investigation, which includes talking with parents, putting a safety plan in place, looking at other factors, lots of things. And so when that in-depth investigation is done, that's when it said, okay, this is substantiated or not. So yes, it's not just, yeah, it is, or no, it isn't. There's a lot of things for a principal to look at. Again, going back to the group that created the policy, we were all, so my experience as assistant principal when this law first came into place, the principal I was working with took the policy and put it on my desk. And then when I had my first incident, I'm like, okay, now what do I do? And I had to come up with my own, way to investigate. Going from that experience, I don't want all these folks coming up with their own way to investigate. One, and be inconsistent between just the schools and a district, and two, across the state. So that's why we have an 8-page document that helps them with that. So bullying, when it's addressed, the school would look at if it takes place on school grounds, if it takes place at a school-sponsored event or a related activity, so like a field trip, a school dance, a football game. While students are being transported to and from school, great to have transportation here, and this could be on a school bus, and this could be in a van, this could be to and from a field trip, this could not just necessarily to and from home. And some other situations come my way, we can also even talk about the bus stop or kids walking to school. That would kind of be in my mix as well. And then cyberbullying, when that is addressed, looking at it, was a school device used, was it used on school time? And then the other piece is that cyberbullying behavior coming out into the school day. Did something happen on the weekend on personal cell phones, but now it's coming into the school day? principals will address that. So now the policy and procedure. So the law said all that stuff. So the law is going to now define what we have to put in policy and procedures. It's the responsibility of students and others to comply. So others means anyone who walks into this building, who is employed here, who's volunteering, who's even using this space for some type of function. So when you walk into buildings in MSAD 44, you are to comply with the policy. Simply a statement that says that bullying, harassment, sexual harassment, and retaliation for reporting is prohibited. And the superintendent has a major role in this, as he does in lots of things. The superintendent must designate a principal or another school personnel person to administer the policy, meaning they have to make sure the procedures that are being outlined in the policy need to be followed. And the superintendent almost, will also say, this is who you would go to talk about the incident. It's also a requirement that staff, coaches, and advisors, must report as well. So this is important. This is saying that although the superintendent is saying it's the principal who's doing the investigation, or the dean of students is doing the investigation, if a student or a parent is maybe not familiar with that person or is not comfortable approaching that particular role, you can always go to another adult who is employed here in the school. And then that person has to then go to the principal or assistant principal. So that's important to know, because it is our teachers and sometimes our bus drivers and others in the building who kids will go to. And it has to be known that that adult has to carry that message on. These are the three procedural documents that are in the bigger handout you have. It's JICK E1, E2, and E3. And E1 is simply the procedure for someone to make that initial report. I've been bullied, my child's been bullied, I saw bullying happening. That can be done in written form, it can be, whether it's handwritten, typed, emailed. It can also be done anonymously. So those reports can be made anonymously. Sometimes it's hard with anonymous reports because if there's some very critical information that a principal may need to do that investigation, they might not know who to talk to about it. So if you do an anonymous report, put quite a few details in it. But there has to be that procedure for reporting. And I don't know exactly what SAD's 44 procedure is. That's what the administrators are going to speak to. And I don't need to know at the state level what that is, but the administrators will tell you that. I just tell them they have to have one. And then a procedure to investigate. And this is that 8-page document I was just talking about. It's communicating with the parents of both students involved or both parties involved. And what's really important through that investigation is the student safety plan. So that's why we're communicating with parents, or why principals are communicating with parents, because they're going to be putting a safety plan in place. So what does that look like? We're recognizing that your child is feeling intimidated, they're in a hostile environment, there's some physical harm, threats of physical harm. I'm going to work with you to put some safety measures in place so they're not feeling that way. And those can continue throughout the investigation, as they should, and even beyond the investigation. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, is there a time frame that you're giving to investigate, and if you did, what are the parents and students who are being bullied supposed to do for the safety of their students?
So as far as the time frame goes, do you guys have an exact number of days, or do you say promptly? That was the recommendation that comes from the department, either to do it promptly or a certain number of days.
So the state does not have an actual time?
No, the state does not give an actual number of days. Yeah.
So any district can, not saying that they would, they can pull it out over the entire year span?
Well, we do use the word promptly. So, but again, the word promptly could mean different things to different districts.
Exactly.
So we did put in the model that came out, they could use the word promptly, or they could add a certain number of days, so.
But again, you left it in each district to handle that.
Yeah. Which may, the reason is because there's other procedures that are in place in a district to investigate other type of behaviors too, so they may want to align that with other procedures that they already have in place. So that's why we don't give an exact number of days. But because at the onset of the investigation, it's told that the principals pick up the phone or have this communication with families in a prompt way, that would help with that timeline.
Okay, and then the parents and the student, when they talk about a student safety plan, is that to keep the student safe and the parent safe and anybody else in that pathway of whatever may be going on in a particular moment?
That's the goal of it, and those conversations, they can be hard. It can be really hard. It can involve a lot of people, and sometimes bringing all those people together and have that conversation could take some time. But the goal is we have a student who's not feeling safe at school, whether it's physically or mentally, and we're going to bring all the adults together who can support that student and come up with ideas, a plan to say, you know, what can we do right now? What can we do in the future? And sometimes the safety plan is for the immediate, but it can always be changed. Or you put a safety plan in place and you're like, that's not working. Let's go back and look at it. But again, it's just all that communication and talking with one another, like what can we do? And sometimes I'll say to parents, what the school is saying could sometimes be hard to hear, because what the school is noticing and observing is something not quite along the lines of what a child is bringing home to share. And I know, I'm a parent as well, and sometimes you just get different views of the situation, but to never discredit those perceptions, never discredit the perception of the student, of the teachers, of the parent. We have to bring all of those together and have those hard conversations to say, you know, what are we going to do next to make sure the student's feeling safe? And then once that investigation's done, you know, you have your investigation's done, either it's been determined to be bullying or not. Safety plan can stay because it needs to be, or because the behaviors have changed, the safety plan goes away, or pieces of it stay. But at the end, if it's determined, or if it's a substantiated incident determined to have been bullying, there's a remediation procedure. And the remediation is where we're saying, okay, we have this bullying behavior, we need to change it. So these are the steps we're going to put in place. So we're going to put some counseling in place for both students. Are we going to put some anger management in place for one, and some social skills work for the other, whatever that's going to be. But that's going to be kind of an easy thing to come up with because of all the communication that's been happening throughout the investigation. No, there's always a procedure to appeal, and an appeal procedure is kind of generic. You know, if your child comes home with a C on their math test and you're like, you know, I don't think he earns a C, he should get an A. The appeal process would be go to the teacher, talk to the teacher about it, and if you're not getting anywhere, you go to the principal. So whenever there's a decision made that involves a student, there's always a process of someone to talk to talk about the decision that has been made and how we can possibly change it. If necessary, law enforcement would be brought in. Typically, it would be around the harassment piece, if we're thinking that, or if the behavior is directed towards civil rights related stuff, and there should be a procedure in place for that. Again, that's something that the district would come up with that procedure. The department has not come up with that for districts to use. And then another clear statement, any person engaging in bullying is subject to disciplinary actions, graduated, including alternative discipline. Again, we don't want to suspend, expel all the time, only when absolutely necessary, but let's look at some alternative measures to help change that behavior. And then, yes, go ahead.
Sorry. What is the state's, I guess, view on the difference between each schooling, from elementary school to middle school to high school? Are there different levels of the alternative discipline, or is that again left up to the district to kind of formulate on their own?
That's a really good question. From the state, there isn't. But there's also the guidance that I provide is developmentally appropriate. So if we go back to the definition of bullying, and we're talking about intimidation. Intimidation in high school would look different than middle school, would look different than elementary school. Stealing a pencil off a kid's desk next to you in kindergarten, it would look different in a high school. So we're talking about that it would look different. And it would look different in the sense of developmentally appropriate. Some schools may have different, sometimes different behavior expectations in place just because of the age difference. But the department hasn't given any clear things like at elementary school this must happen, middle this must happen, and high school.
Maybe I'll left it to the district to come up with.
Yep, and that you could say that's for academics, that's for a lot of things, but that's what a district does. They look at grade levels, they look at developmentally appropriate, they look at the resources that are available in the building. There might be some resources at the elementary level, not at the high school level as far as guidance services or counseling services. But that's always a good topic to talk to schools about, like from your perspective, if you're an elementary teacher, I think we should have this kind of supports in place, or high school, I think we should have this kind of supports in place. And then this policy can be also combined and looked at with non-discrimination, harassment, sexual harassment policies as well, which I've alluded to that, the fact that the definition has that third part too. So before I let the administrators go, any quick questions for me, and then we'll always come back to questions.
So, from the slides here, is taunting not considered bullying? So
you would want to have that discussion. So in what was just, if you just want to take those exact words in that slide and use those to define the behavior, that's what you'd have to do. You'd have to take what's defining taunting, what's defining bullying, and is there any similarities, and then specifically talking about the behavior. So before, and that actually helps me with the thing I want to say before you guys come up. Like I said at the beginning, this is a really hard subject to talk about, and it's hardest when you're talking about your own child. And when your child is hurt, you want some kind of next step that will maybe justify what just happened. And it's hard not to talk about all the people involved in the situation, but what's best in changing this is to talk about the behavior. So if you find yourself in a place where you want to talk about other children, and you've been told by these folks that we can't talk about the other children, you can always talk about the behavior. So what was the behavior that happened that is harming your child? Just talk about that behavior, and that will disconnect you from any contentious issue when it talks about, when we're talking about confidentiality and talking about other students. So sometimes just keeping that in mind, we're just going to talk about this behavior because that's what we want to change. All right, let these folks go.
I just wanted to just quickly pop in and just, Sarah just mentioned it, but it's a thing called FERPA, Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And a lot of times there is frustration if you feel like your son or daughter has been involved in a bullying situation. You really want to know what happened to this kid, who's this kid, you know, and as by law, we can't talk to you about that student, but just to echo what Sarah just said, we can talk to you about the behaviors. And so sometimes you might get frustrated because you might be calling and somebody might say to you, well, I can't talk to you about that. You feel like you ought to be able to hear that. The reason why that's being said is because by law, you know, we can't share, nor could we share something about your child with another parent. So I just want to mention that. The other piece is this law, which was approved by the board, I think in October or November with the second reading, has really been beneficial because it does provide administrators with very specific steps that have to be taken in order to determine whether or not the alleged act was bullying or wasn't. The question that came up about promptly versus a number of days is a great question. And what we're finding, I think, and I don't want to speak for them, they may be saying this themselves in a few minutes, this is a very complicated process. And like anything else, hopefully, the more that we do it, the quicker it will become. But there are many, many forms, interviews, investigations that have to happen as part of that. Finally, the last thing I want to say before I introduce the administrators or ask them to come and take over is the most challenging thing for an administrator sometimes is when in talking with a parent, they'll say, you know, my son or daughter has been bullied by this student since 3rd grade. And if there's no record of that having ever been reported, then it's very difficult for the administration to go backwards and say that they had addressed it. So I would really encourage any of you and anybody that you know that if they are concerned about that, they should be filing a report. And as Sarah said, you can do it anonymously, but if it's only anonymous reports we get, and you'll see this in the policy, there's really no disciplinary steps that can be taken. It will still be investigated, it will still be looked into. Grab a copy of the packet. It's also online on the MSAD 44 website in our policies under section J. And you'll see not just the policy, but all of those different components that Sarah mentioned. So I just wanted to step in and make those few comments. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to the building administrators. And they promised to take no more than 3 hours to go through this.
Good evening, everyone. When Dr. Murphy introduced us earlier, we were back 2 to you, so here we are, front 2. So let me reintroduce myself. I am Cheryl Lang, and I am the principal of Telstar High School. We'll just do a quick round of introductions now that you can see us front face.
I'm Mark Kenny. I'm the middle school principal here at Telstar.
I'm Kristen Dako. I'm the Dean of Students here at Telstar High School.
Hi, Elaine Ferlin, Crescent Park Principal. Jessica Wilkie, the Woodstock Principal. And last but not least, Kathleen Collins, Special Education Director.
All right, so as Sarah said earlier in her presentation, the investigation that goes into bullying takes a tremendous amount of time and dedication, hence all the forms up here, and we do encourage you to really get into the policies and take a look at not only the policy, but actually what goes into the actual investigation. And I know that both Sarah and Dr. Murphy mentioned the anonymous, and I would like to just address that in saying that you can always submit anything anonymously, but please know they are right. It is really hard to investigate when things are submitted to us anonymously, but know that even if you do give us your name and information that goes along with it, we keep that information as confidential as possible. So it might not be in the best interest to do it anonymously, but we we will maintain confidentiality. And so just know that, and we're going to talk a little bit later about, how you can help, how we can all come together as a community of really providing your students a safe learning environment. So the policies here, again, there's several of them that we go through. The one that, the policy itself that identifies bullying, and then it goes into the bullying report form, the bullying investigation, and then if it is determined to be bullying, it goes into the JICKE3, where we really do start documenting the disciplinary action. And keep in mind also that even if a situation doesn't get addressed as bullying, it still is a situation that is going to be handled, and we are going to, remediate or have consequences for the situation. So know that, like Sarah said earlier, bullying is something that we've kind of pulled out of, disciplinary action as something that really needs to be addressed by itself. But there are other situations that occur that aren't necessarily labeled as bullying, but they are definitely something that needs to be addressed, and we make sure we do that. All right, so we have this administrative procedure for alleged bullying. So whenever a situation comes to us, we always say it's alleged bullying in the beginning, because unless it really gets determined as bullying, then we can't really say that someone is indeed bullying. So we begin the investigation, we do witness statements, and just addressing the part about, how long does it take? Well, I think Ms. Dacre will speak to that a little bit later, because sometimes when you start collecting those witness statements, all of a sudden more people are drawn into the situation, and then hence you've got to collect more witness statements, and then it can be almost like the domino effect, and you're trying to reach out to people outside of the school, you're trying to pull people together to really determine, how can we really make sure that we're investigating this to the best of our ability and thoroughly. And so it does take a lot of time sometimes. The one important piece that we want you to remember is just that we want to keep open lines of communication. So I don't necessarily think as much as how much time does it take to investigate it, but are we keeping in constant communication so you are being updated and kept informed of how it's progressing. And then, as Sarah spoke of earlier, sometimes the consequences are other than a suspension or an expulsion. We really do look at remediation, and our number one goal always is safety of our students so that they have the best learning environment. And we also want to, with that, we want to couple that with making sure that we're minimizing the potential for repeat behaviors. So we really look at that. We also look at, if a student is having issues that, maybe potentially is bullying, we want to look at what are some strategies that we can put in place for that student too, so he or she doesn't continue to be maybe a target. Anything you guys want to add? All right. Oh, yes. So the flow chart, we do have copies of the flow chart up front, and okay, Mark's going to put them up back, and they really do walk you through in a yes or no fashion as to yes or no. Does this take you to the next step in a situation being identified as a bullying situation? That is in our policy guidelines as GICKE4. Anything else? All set? All right. There is a long list of alternative discipline measures. Again, as we've said throughout the evening, it really is about minimizing the potential for repeat behavior and making sure that we're putting measures in place to ensure the safety of all students. I'm not going to read down through them. I think you can take a look at them and recognize that that consequences can come in many ways, shape, or form. Janet?
Just going back to the reports, do you guys keep record of all the reports, whether they're substantiated or not?
Great question. And the question was, do we keep record of the reports, whether they're substantiated or not? Yes, we do. And as a matter of fact, if they are substantiated, they do get, let me finish that statement. I'm looking at Sarah. If they do get, because we're just learning about this platform, the NEO platform, if they are substantiated, they do get reported in the NEO platform. And I don't know if Sarah wants to add anything to that, but that goes directly to the Maine Department of Education. And if they aren't substantiated, we do report those in our Infinite Campus, which is also connected to the state. And Sarah does want to add something to it.
Yes, it comes to the state, and we get the data on what type of incident it was, actions taken, disciplinary measures, but there's no personal identifying information that comes with that. So we do get that data, but it's just numbers, and we don't know the kiddo involved.
And Dr. Murphy just told me to step back from the microphone because clearly I'm using my teacher voice. How's this? Is this better? Can you hear me way up back? All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Don't mean to blast you. Question? Oh, yes.
Let's say someone's been bullied all through middle school, they're a freshman or in high school, it's been reported every time they got bullied. At what point, if the school does nothing, is it out of the school's control as parents? Let's say the bully is still bullying the kid. The school hasn't done nothing, it's been reported several times, it's been looked at as bullying, the kid's still doing it, the school's doing nothing. What do parents do?
Part of it is truly getting the definition of is it being bullying or not, because there's a difference between mistreatment and bullying. So part of the investigation with this new policy is being able to better define that and identify it.
So if the school's telling the parents that it's bullying, they're handling it, they're filling out paperwork, it's going to get put in a filing system, it happens again, stuff's being handled, it happens again, nothing's being handled. What do we do?
We'd have to work on it together because each situation is going to be different. It's not always necessarily the same. And so we can't always compile one situation with another. But those would have to go into account, and those would also be part of how the alternative discipline will be handled for the bully, the alleged bully, and for the victim in their safety plan. This policy we now have is way more comprehensive than anything we've had in the past to work from. This particular one just started this fall. It was just finally adopted by the board in November. So the packet you have, the 8-page documentation, it's only been at our disposal since November to be working with. So it is different than the way things might have been handled in the past. It's definitely documented differently than in the past. So that would be hard to compare the two at this point in time. But moving forward, having that documentation and having it be in the student's file is also evidence when you're going into an investigation to have that already in place. So it would change the safety plan, it would change the remediation piece quickly. In the past, we didn't always have that. So you had the parent's word, or you had the knowledge of the administrator who might have been on hand previously, or you have, and we get this a lot, anytime something wrong was happened in school, it's automatically called bullying. And then the part of the battle with that is that it's not always bullying. And so that's part of the challenge as well, is truly defining through the investigation what level it rises to. So does that help answer your question, Jason?
So
a little bit. Okay.
Thank you.
Just like I asked the department representative, does this district have levels for each? You're asking a high school student to write an essay about bullying a student who's much, much smaller and much even weaker minded than him. I don't think what the district would see as an appropriate alternative discipline for that student, for that high school student. Someone like elementary school, even 6th grade, junior high. But we all know as parents and as educators and teachers and things like that at every grade level, there's a different mindset for each grade. Some further on, some not as further on. But in each case, does the district have something in set for that, or are they just going by the guidelines that the district or the Department of Education has set?
Our policy is set for K-12, and so our paperwork and everything is set up as a system-wide K-12 procedure and policy to follow, the documentation. That doesn't mean that in working with it, with the administrator and the student and the parents, that the differentiation couldn't happen, that there are different types of alternative disciplines even within. You might check the same box, but it's going to look differently in third grade than it does with an 11th grader.
Mark, me. I think too that's a great question, and one of the things that we would count on in this scenario, in the process that we're using now, is knowledge of the individual building principals about the age level of the students that they're working at. I think your question would be that much more difficult if it was a K-12 school, and there are some K-12 schools. But we very specifically have elementary education people as our elementary education principals, same with middle school and high school. So as we go through this process, I think there probably would be some deviations in terms of interpretation, but it would really be based on the principal's knowledge of the students at that grade level.
Right, but are the parents of this district informed of that? Or are they automatically assume when they go and they see policies like what you have on the website, that these are the guidelines, these are examples of alternative discipline? When a high school parent goes to that, whose daughter or son is being bullied, they're going to go back and go, okay, so this is what you're using as an alternative discipline.
They're examples. So some of those could be, and some of those might not be. And going back to what Mrs. Lyon was talking about, I think one of the things moving forward that we really want to see happen as a result of this is a lot more communication between the administrator and the parent. So that question can get asked, and there can be some conversation between the two about what the outcomes might look like.
The other question that I had was, when y'all received this new guideline, when y'all received this new plan, did the district inform the parents of this new plan and show them the same? When y'all received it, did it then go into parents' hands so that they weren't? Because I know this is the first time I'm hearing it, and I'm just coming to the district. So I've not seen this. I've not, even when I went to go in, because I do have special needs children, go in and look at the procedures and policies here, this wasn't something that I saw ready, available for me to find. So again, did y'all make that available for the parents in this district already?
We have portions of it, and it's in our policy handbooks, our student handbooks, which are online, and it's in the district policy manual. It's not separated out as saying, here's the bullying policy by itself. And we did not send paper copies home, no.
No. So
But it has been reported in the press. There were 2 school board meetings that addressed it, and obviously the notifications about tonight. We will be, the handbooks that are, student handbooks are going out. They'll be included in the next set of handbooks that do go out as well.
okay. Can you put this PowerPoint online?
Yes.
Yes.
Will be,
Will be.
after tonight, these will be on the websites as well.
We'll actually have 2, so if you don't like one of them, you can watch the other one. So there's actually one we did tonight, and then the administrators put together a different one just on the policy. So
Yeah, because this is the first time I've seen the different forms. Before I had to look for certain forms that needed to be filled out for registration. So seeing this for the first time and not being so accessible to parents looking at the website, they're not going to know that those are the forms that's there.
The step 1 was the public hearing tonight, and then we can put it up after.
Okay.
Lindsay?
So, kind of piggybacking off the question that was over that way. So if parents or like a teacher or someone from a volunteer in school are seeing the incidents of bullying and they're not being resolved, one of the policies and procedures said that there needs to be a procedure to communicate with local law enforcement. Where does that come into play? Where is the line where, if the family's feeling like it's not being addressed, or if the school's feeling like they aren't able to address it? When is that set? And maybe it's new policy for the district to adopt as well. That was curious about that.
It is new. Parents always have the right to go to the sheriff's department. We would hope that we would be able to work on it with schools. At a certain level, especially with cyberbullying, there are things that we can't control. The hardest things are things coming from outside of school into school and affect the school, especially through technology, that we don't have the wherewithal. We have had to rely on the Sheriff's Department, even before the state police with their cyber crimes unit, because we don't have the resources to try and track things through cyberspace and the same means. So we have that option disposal. I guess it would depend on the situation and the severity. And it would also depend on if the safety plan's not working or if things have been grossly violated, then we'll have to go to the next level.
I also think your question, Lindsay, lines up with Jason's question a little bit, because if it's repeated bullying, the bullying has to be substantiated at first. And so if it's another situation that lines up with something that's already been substantiated, then it would be repeated bullying, and there should be a plan in place as part of that safety procedure to ensure that that won't continue. The law enforcement piece, it's interesting because not only have we as school systems, I think, developed, but back when this all started, cyber bullying wasn't something that was even included in bullying policies. And if you went to Sheriff's Department or the Police Department, a lot of times early on, they would tell you, we really can't get involved in that. And they too have really come around and working together as a team. So I think cyberbullying wasn't really even included as part of our previous policy, and not even maybe in the state to the same degree that it is today. But we're probably seeing cyberbullying as much as we're seeing anything else. And like Mark said, it trickles into the school usually from outside.
And one thing that I would like to add that we have implemented as a result of this new bullying procedures that we're following is in the lines of communication. When we communicate, we really want to make sure that that communication is timely, for one, but we also, one piece that we weren't as good at as I think we are now is making sure that we communicated closure. So whenever we had a case, whether it was substantiated or not, we want to make sure that we provide closure to that case. And so now, and that in the past, I think we were having communication maybe via telephone, maybe via email with the parents, but now we actually do document it in writing. And we document it for both the alleged victim and whether that alleged victim is indeed a victim in the end, and the alleged bully, and again, whether that alleged bully is indeed confirmed as a bully in the end. We notify the parents, both in writing, that the investigation has come to a conclusion and what are the safety measures that we have put in place, or what are the consequences that we have put in place, and how we plan on moving forward from there. And then giving that parent, the parents, an opportunity to let us know, do they feel that they've gotten the closure that they've needed. So that's something that we've recently put in place, and I think that that was an important piece of our communication. Yes.
We're talking a lot about the definition of bullying and according to the state versus popular vernacular, which is a huge difference in reality. But either way, a lot of what the state says seems that it's still subject to interpretation. So when does the school let either parents or students know if this is considered actual bullying? Because I can tell you that I personally have talked to a slew of you, and not once has anyone told me whether or not what I was saying was bullying or not. So, and this is countless times that I've had conversations, and not once has anyone told me, well, that's not actually technically the definition of bullying. So where are parents supposed to, because I personally myself, if someone has my kid in tears every day, that's creating a hostile environment. So if I'm saying that this is what's going on, and I feel that it fits that there, but nothing's ever come to a closure determines to be substantiated? I mean, is there a process now with the new policy and stuff that we're gonna actually, people are actually gonna be told whether this is considered to be part of?
In the 8-page packet that you have, part of, after going through JICKE2, and going through the whole investigation, that's when it gets determined if it's substantiated or not. You would now get a letter one way or the other that it's been reported, it's been investigated, and what happens at the end of it. If it is to be substantiated, that's when it goes to JICKE3, which is what kind of consequence follows from there. That was not in place before in our previous policy, and those steps and definitions were not there, and the communication piece, the documentation piece was different. It didn't exist. It does now.
So basically, in the past, we weren't,
There
as
was
parents,
no-
we weren't being told if this was actually bullying or not.
Not in the same way, and our policy was written completely different than it is in this one. Other than the face-to-face meetings and the phone communications, it was a different setup.
Just promptly.
Promptly, as in as best as possible, as one,
Investigation.
it's trying to deal with it as quickly within that given couple day span that time allows. Yes, it doesn't, yes, the goal is within a few days to be able to wrap it up, because if somebody truly is in a situation that's not safe for them, you don't want to delay it for weeks on end.
Are you going to review the rest of the cases that have been reported from the beginning of this school year with this new policy?
I'll say that I would say if you feel that there's a situation that has not been resolved and it was initiated earlier in the year and you don't feel like it's come to closure, I would suggest you fill out a new report and submit it, and then it would become an active case and it could be considered under this new policy. So if you have a question about that, or if there's something out there that you think was left unresolved, you have a process in place which would allow you to reopen that. At this point, it would be investigated and the same decision would be made. So in those situations, I mean, obviously you're not going to go back 10 years, but if it's something that's happened fairly recently and you feel as though it needs a little bit more information, you should go ahead and file a report.
So the ones that have filed reports already with the schools for bullying so far this year are going to have to reapply with this new policy?
No, someone asked the question how they could take care of that, and just so you're aware, because I think it's important that you get the right information. Most of the allegations that have been made this year would have been made since this policy went in place. If they weren't, and if a person felt as though they wanted to have it reconsidered, then they should contact the building administrator and reopen that, just ask them if they would pursue that based on the original concerns. In most cases, as Mark said, probably parents have been talked to, whether they got the information that they were hoping to get, might be different, but it wasn't as though it was just reported and nothing was ever done with it. And if that is the case, then definitely I would suggest that people would contact them and take advantage of this new policy. But the bottom line is, we think this policy is going to allow us to move forward in a positive and productive way, and we would like everybody else to get on board with that as well. So moving ahead or in the future, or if you have concerns, contact the building administrator that you talked to originally and see what can be done about it. It's kind of a practical approach to it.
For your repeat offenders, is there a policy that, zero tolerance at some point? Where it's just a detriment to the school and everybody else's education, that just like a three strikes policy? I mean, how many chances do you give a repeat offender? Is there anything that covers that?
We do not have a current set number policy at this. There's one that exists in our current district policy, no.
Okay, so you have a child that's substantiated that is bullying 10 times a year, and he gets to stay in school?
I would like to think that the administration would have enough discretion that if it's that detrimental for that student, for the students around them, that we have to come up with something beyond just the alternative discipline and suspension measures, that we could all agree that that's not the best interest of that student and the students around them, that we have to do something about it. There's no set number, they've said it twice in a year, 4 times in a year, that they're automatically removed, but it would have to elevate to a different level.
I feel like my question kind of relates to what Courtney just said. So I definitely am a strong believer in suspension and expulsion are not clean. You know, you gotta keep kids in school and change their behavior. But when I read through this list of alternative disciplines, a lot of it to me would fall on either a social worker or a counselor. And is Telstar really equipped with someone who has time and like to actually address, like someone, I don't know, that's where my concern is. It's like mediation, counseling, anger management, skill building, like when would these things happen during the day and who's doing them with these kids? Because the reality is if it isn't happening, then that's what's going to keep happening. And like that to me is a big red flag. And the other thing I'm just hearing is like, oh, we got all this, like the protocol seems very ironed out, right? And we're hearing over and over again, there's a protocol, we'll follow this, we're going to do interviews, it's going to take a lot of time, there's going to be documents, and it's like, okay, so now there's a plan now, but like that's not actually, the part that matters is this part. And so what, like, are you guys ready to do this? And who is doing it? And are they qualified to do it? Yeah, like that's my real concern.
I'll take a shot at it, maybe follow up, but we currently, fortunately, just hired another social worker for our building. So we currently have in place 2 full-time social workers and guidance counselor in the Telstar complex. We also have a person who does all of our special ed social work on top of that. And I think the state guidelines say something like 325 students per social worker. And obviously in this building, we're looking at about 350 to 360 students, and we have the number that I stated. So we recognize the importance of having that kind of counseling available. To be honest with you, at the beginning of the year, we had an opening that we couldn't fill, and it took us a while to get that filled, but this person is actually coming on board February vacation. So we will have another full-time social worker to complement the guidance counselor, 2 social workers that are already here. So I think we will have that. It doesn't mean that that's the list that you see here, and a student could still end up getting suspended and expelled. And to Courtney's question, you know, I think it's logical that if the student presents himself or herself as a person who is going to cause safety issues in the building, and that starts to expand in terms of being an issue, obviously kids' safety is going to be number 1 in this building. So we will do what we need to do to address that.
I mean, are teachers being trained with conflict resolution skills and ways to de-escalate situations in the classroom and how to recognize bullying, and is that happening?
For the building administrators. State of Maine has a great website, and we're using that as training guidelines. And we've sent people off to bullying workshops and so on to come back and share different information with staff. The building administrators can tell you a little bit about what they've done for example.
Actually, Kathleen, do you want to speak to the restraint training and the de-escalating? Because that's something that you actually were instrumental in putting in place.
So one of the things we did this year, all staff people throughout the district took part in a training. It was an online training provided through the State Department of Education on restraint and seclusion. We also offer to staff within the building, to each principal, and myself as a director chose a number of staff people from each building to be trained in what's known as safety care response for an escalated situation within the school day. The restraint and seclusion reports any type of issue that involves a response from us where we need to intervene. If it's happening in the school day and it's a dangerous situation, we need to actually hands-on or do something to separate children or isolate them in any way. There are very strict state guidelines, as Speaker is one of the people who directs us to do that and helps us with that. So that's what we've done with restraint, seclusion, and safety care. And those three types of things involve teaching de-escalation procedures and how to handle things to make the environment and each of the students or whoever's involved and around them safe and to respond quickly.
How come there's only a couple of people and not more?
Well,
What happens if one of those people isn't there the day that there's an incident?
We have currently 4 to 6 people in each building now, which is the first time ever. I started last year, I came on after I retired, and I was invited to come and help, which I did. It was about a year ago, and I began in earnest training people within each building and making sure to combine and have not just special education staff, but general ed staff and all of the principals trained. So we're building from there, and we currently have, in some buildings we have 6 people, in some we have 4. And
So are you planning to train more or just?
we do ongoing training. We are not aiming to train everyone. We're aiming to keep current 4 to 6 people in each building. That is my goal. So that, because you need 2 people to respond. If it's safety care training, you need 2 people to respond to the situation. So given that people are sometimes out sick, someone's not available, given 4 to 6 people, we have not had a situation that we could not respond to. We've had people in each building to cover what was needed.
So I think that's question was, are any of you trained to handle anger management, health counseling and intervention, or mental health counseling? And if you aren't, are there people that are going to be readily available to come and help you deal with that stuff?
Mm-hmm. I myself,
Yeah, I mean, he said there's 2 social workers. I mean, my experience in school, though, when I worked in school, was that usually the guidance counselor got, there's mandated kids. I don't know if it's tied or to New York, but there's kids with mandated counseling. And often the social workers or the guidance counselors have like entirely full schedules with kids with IEPs that have mandated counseling. And there really wasn't a lot of extra time, staff time. So I think, you know, like who is that person with an open office that responds when there's a immediate, because like the other thing here to me is I see this is like a kid has to come home, complain to their parent has to file a report, and this is like, you know, discipline is now happening like days and days and days later. And to me, I feel like probably some of these situations don't even need to get to that point. I don't
So
know.
are you, it sounds like you're speaking from personal experience.
No, I'm not. I do not have a child in school.
Oh, okay. All right, so
Students can fill out the forms on a given day. We do, our social workers in the building, yes, they have a pretty full schedule, but as issues pop up, they get free. We do have some outside services coming in from Tri-County to work with students as well. So we can get extra support in if we need to in situations. We do not have every single staff member on staff trained in de-escalation techniques yet, and to work with some of these mental health. They're teachers. They are not all trained in mental health. And it's something that's continuously working on. They do the best they can. As administrators, we're not all experts in the mental health field either. So we have to rely on those people that we do have in our buildings. You know, the need keeps increasing. They work a lot of magic and work the best they can, and we address it as it comes up. But part of it is that it needs to be reported to the administration, or it needs to be brought to us in a given situation, and not waiting until, well, this is the 5th time it's happened, and now it's being reported. You know, trying to have those reports happening as they're happening does help go a long way with that as well.
I just wanted to explain, my name is Marcel Pollack, I serve on the school board. The school board is in an unusual situation because we create and pass policy, but we also are a board that acts in terms of expulsions. So if an administrator recommends expulsion, that expulsion hearing goes to the school board. School board acts as a judiciary. And I've been in a number of different expulsion hearings. The board has expelled students. It's one of the worst things that we ever have to do. But we do it if it's necessary. And typically, if a student is expelled, there's typically usually an amount of time, and there is a plan that's developed to get the student back into the school. And that plan typically involves counseling, outside counseling. And I think it's typically not school counseling.
Right.
It's an outside. So we will use outside resources. Again, I want to emphasize, it's a last resort. We hate to do it. You don't want to be looking at a parent and kid and changing their lives, but we have done it, and we have expelled students. And students have come back if they've shown that they are capable of coming back.
And also to address the question, these are not necessarily all in-house services. Sometimes we will draw on other services like Tri-County or other available services within the district or within the area. And sometimes it will also be the responsibility of the family to provide some of these services in cooperation with the schools. So some of those on there we would be handling internally. Some of those we might be bringing other support in to help us with it. They're all realistic, although obviously sometimes some are more difficult than others.
I know when getting expelled, it's a little different to talk about outside resources when it comes to discipline. Has there been any talk about community service?
Yep. Jason, let me just address that. So for example, when the board expels a student, back when I was a student, a long time ago. Thanks, Jason. When you got expelled, you were gone. That was it. You didn't come back. You were expelled from school, and you had to figure out what you're going to do with your life. Now, a reentry plan is developed, and that reentry plan often includes things like community service, counseling, things that are designed to demonstrate that the student is actually taking the situation seriously and understands that they made a mistake. I think everybody in life will make a mistake. Anybody who tells you they haven't is probably also a good person to identify as someone that's not telling you the truth. So the goal is always to say to the student, we hope you do come back. We hope you meet all these reentry. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they do. And when they do, they typically come back and they've learned a lesson and can move forward in a positive way, become a contributing member of society. That's the goal of an expulsion. But you're right, I think 20 years ago, I don't think community service wasn't a reentry plan. That's a good question.
I have, so kind of opposite of what Courtney said, if there's a repeat kid who's repeating bullying, what about if there's a kid who's repeating, saying that they're being bullied, but they're not? Like, what happens to that kid? Is there going to be help for that child to understand what bullying really is? Because there are some kids who will run into the office constantly, so-and-so looked at me the wrong way. I'm being bullied. How is that being handled?
So another part of this policy that's great is we also come up with a plan for the victim in the situation. And that might involve meeting with a social worker or a counselor to work on strategies and determine, how to respond in situations. Because we all know that, like you said, everybody responds differently. So that's why the investigation is so important as well, because sometimes those students do come to us a lot, and we really need to, before we falsely accuse someone, we need to make sure it's accurate, but then we can also look at putting supports in place for that student. So there is a place on our form, as well as our letter that goes home, that talks about steps that are being taken to help support that student in those aspects. Because we do want to teach our kids resiliency as well, definitely.
And before we move on to how you can help, which we've talked about somewhat this evening, I would be remiss if I didn't introduce a really important part of our district as well. He is our transportation director, and he is responsible for the safety and care of our students as they travel to and from our schools. So without further ado, let me introduce Ron Deegan.
I first wanted to apologize how I looked today because I was kind of hands-on today, boilers and all those type of things. I just want to actually briefly talk about, the transportation department and how they fit into this process. And I want to do it twofold. The first one is actually the training piece. We're no different than you as the teaching staff and the principals actually set their training up. We actually do training in the transportation department also. At the beginning of the year, we have a 2-day workshop. And in that workshop, there's many subject matters. We cover problem solving, decision making, conflict resolution, student management. But we also cover bullying. And in that, we try to go ahead and actually make it basic for those drivers to not have to think about whether or not, oh gee whiz, is it falling in this category? What we do is we talk about basically about what is the characteristics of a bully. We have bullet statements about that, here's those characteristics to them. The other thing is we also talk about the types of bullying. Whether or not it's a one-to-one, whether or not it's social bullying, and so they get a sense of looking for those types and looking for those characteristics. And from that point, what happens is in the communication process, how does this work? How does all this information flow through the transportation department and get to the building administrators in a timely fashion? Because they can't do their job unless we go ahead and we have those type of concerns that come through. We need to get that information to them in a timely fashion immediately. And it can come several different ways. That communication chain can come several different ways. I've had students actually send me an email and talk about a situation. I've had parents give me a call. Administrators actually would get the information maybe from a student who's coming in and they call me. So there's several different ways how that comes in that I have to go ahead and actually take a look and investigate, get the information that they need on that certain bus, a certain date, a certain time that it happened. Now, how do we do that? What we do is immediately when any of that information flows into my office, myself and I have a dispatcher, we work together and we go ahead and actually take a look, we bring the driver in, and sometimes the driver doesn't even know this happening. We have a different environment. Teachers, at times have 1 to 20 in front of them, but we have 1 to 50 behind us. And so there's a lot of times that they don't hear or they don't see. But what's great about the system that we have is that we have a tool. We have cameras in the buses, audio and video, and that's a great tool that we use, that we go ahead and we cut that particular section. We go ahead and actually give that to the building administrators, and they use that as a tool to go ahead and actually take a look at what category that is, whether it is bullying or not, whether it's just that inappropriate behavior, things like that. We also, what happens is that my drivers understand is that I actually try to actually make sure they know that it's pretty simple for them. Is that if a child comes to them and say, such and such has done something I feel uncomfortable, that's the key for them. I want them to know that they're not the experts, okay? I'm not the expert, but they know that we're going to get it to those people with all the data that we have that they can determine whether or not it is. Now, do I have a sense with the new policy? Sure I do, okay? And do I have an opinion when I give it there? Yes. But they're the ones that's going to walk through this, and I may be involved in that process. The driver may be involved in that process. But we do have a process in place. The drivers also document. I always tell the drivers that, if it isn't in writing, it didn't happen. I also tell them writing personalized thought and thought motivates action. That means you get it down, and that really motivates the action and the process to start. They also have a journal. Every bus driver has a daily journal. It's a journal that they have all year long, and their guidance for me is that they document things that they think is going to go ahead and they have to pass on. I also tell them, even if they have a good day, make sure you put in that day, good day. and we move on from there. That's just one more piece of communication that I can actually bring to the building administrators and say, on this date, this happened. Oh, and here's a history here, 2 days before the same behavior happened. So now they have a history on the bus, because the bus drivers documented that this happened a couple times, and they can take it from there. So we do have a process in place, but the biggest thing for me is that I need to do my job and get them the information as soon as possible so they can go ahead and actually do their job in a timely and immediate fashion. And hopefully that works out. Okay? Any questions? Thank you.
So, of course, our first goal is always student safety. The second goal that we have is working with parents and administrators, and the students are a really important part of this as well. So we want to go over a few ideas of how we're going to do this together. We really encourage families to come in and help us out with this process. Don't wait. So the first bullet is please come to administration and report things to us. We all know bullying does not happen in front of us. It's going to happen in places that there are not adults around. So we highly encourage our students to come to us. And lots of times we'll say that, did you tell a teacher? It's so important that kids speak up, and we need to teach them that, and they need to come to teachers who are comfortable with it. It doesn't have to always be the administrator in the building. So we encourage you as well as parents to call us and let us know what your child is saying, and we encourage the students to do that as well.
So working with administrators to provide evidence, I think I spoke of this earlier, but this is a huge piece because quite often when we have situations that we're investigating, there's more to the story than the actual situation that we really need to unpack and really try to figure out together. So it's really important that you be a part of the solution and you really communicate that with us. We've had parents call us up and let us know of various things, on social media that we weren't even aware of. Tonight I had a parent come up to me before this meeting and wants to open those lines of communication and keep them going. We encourage that. We want that communication to happen. Even if you think it might not be related, but it's something that you're just wondering about, don't hesitate to call us up and we'll chat about it together. And speaking of together, we really do pull a team together. We're always saying, let's get together. We've got a situation here that needs immediate attention. Someone said earlier tonight about, social workers, counselors, their schedules are full. If a situation arises, we are going to make it happen. We are going to change their schedules. We're going to pull them out. We're going to get coverage. We're going to pull a team together, and we're going to deal with the situation immediately. And it really does rely on, the outside communication as well. And Ronnie's right, with those video cameras, when I first came on board here, 3.5 years ago, we did not have video cameras, and some of you might remember that I came on board as the Dean of Students. I was Mrs. Daco, and to investigate a situation without those video cameras took so much more time, and because the students, like Sarah said earlier, they're telling it from their perspective, and from their perspective, they did nothing wrong. Or they had a reason for doing what they were doing. But then when we look at the video cameras now and the clarity, we can resolve if it's a situation that's unfolded in front of the video camera. And thanks to Ronnie, we have lots of video cameras. But we can really get a good picture of at least the physical action of what happened in a situation, so that helps. But again, work with us. Be a communication piece with us. We're here, we really do want to work with you. We want what's best for your kids and all of our students here. So communicate with us. Thanks.
Sorry. Yes, I have a question. Is it, what is, I guess, the procedure for parents to come in and volunteer to walk the halls to make sure, because I know that in a lot of cases, there are teachers, standing outside their rooms watching things like that, they've got to get back in. And in some cases, when parents volunteer to walk the halls and things like that, they see more. Custodial people see more than what teachers and even students see. And then is the district open to having bus aides, especially with particular buses who have a longer route than most, or having more difficulty with students on the bus, and instead of being reactive, be proactive and having aides on that bus so that they can't, sit there and just depend on video. They also have been, and another adult eyewitness stating that this is what they perceive in the situation prior to that. Because from what I understand, they were saying y'all cut it and things like that, so you don't see the audio or the physicality of it beforehand, or y'all just see what's happened physically reacting and then the reaction on each party. So if another aide or adult is on the bus, they can help that situation before it becomes an issue where we have to start the paperwork, or we have to start doing things that it is taken care of, so that both bus drivers are able to concentrate or teachers are able to concentrate on what they need to concentrate on. Is the district open to that, and are they willing to work with those paraprofessionals that come in?
We're always willing to have volunteers come in, pick up the phone, give us a call, and then Ronnie, you can speak to the bus.
There are forms and procedures for district volunteers to come in and to be able to fill out the areas they would like to. We're also working on putting up lists on the website so people know a volunteer needs, so they can also know what they can come in and help with that the school identifies needs. And there are procedures to go through to be eligible to do that volunteering. So you in the office with the forms to fill out, and then you go through the procedure and be on the list to be approved to be able to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I just have one more thing to say, and I'm going to watch the game. This is kind of the dreamy me speaking, in the fact that, they say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And when I hear a lot of this, even thinking about the unsubstantiated reports, knowing that even though they're not substantiated, there's still a lot of work in that. And our amazing elementary school, the second grade teachers, I know they're starting to work with the kids, like they're teaching mindfulness down here. They're teaching tools to, support, what parents are hopefully teaching at home, to have in their toolbox to work with anger or frustration or whatever comes up that makes kids want to bully other kids. So maybe we need some more of that kind of education on the higher levels.
We're working with that. Steph LeBlanc has been in 3 times with the middle school staff, and she's done 1 session with each of the elementary and high school staffs as well on the 7 C's and the mindfulness piece. And continue to work on that, because that is a big piece of helping the staff be able to help the kids and to work on that culture and the acceptance piece and drawing a line and knowing the difference between that and being able to identify it. And so that is starting to be district-wide. And it's something that the staff is very interested in, but also it just builds about great conversation and understanding and be able to share that. So she's a great resource, and so we are using that a lot. So that's a big piece.
I just want to reiterate, culture is the main reason why we want to have this meeting tonight. We need your help to help set the culture and to have kids feel safe. If everybody is on the same page and working together, then we're going to accomplish a lot of good things. And there are examples of that all over the district. And what we really want to do is to make sure that that becomes the primary focus for the community, for parents, for teachers, for administrators, and at the end of the day, have a kid feel proud and feel safe about being anywhere in the district. That means that we've all got to be working on that together. And that's why we wanted to have this presentation tonight. hopefully some of that information has gotten out there, and that was the goal. So we're going to take a couple more questions, and then I think we're going to wrap it up. But I would encourage you after tonight, feel free to contact your building administrators. If you have other questions, there'll be more information up on the website. Please follow through on that too, and if you have any questions, please give me a call as well. So, Mrs. Swain?
Yes, is there going to be a procedure set in place that you are going to start having assemblies with the children to bring them on board with these new procedures and things? Has that been put in place, and is that even an option or a plan?
It is something we're going to be doing, yes, and I know in the middle school that our guidance counselor, our guidance classes, with Mrs. Mastroni, who's one of the social workers, she is working with all 6th graders and the 7th graders going through classes on this as well. So they are getting that direct instruction on this and trying to work on these issues as they come up. And the kids also bring issues to her and they deal with it in the moment, so that's also being addressed that way.
What I mean is there going to be a procedure put in place for all students to have the same instruction on these new procedures?
We have not, the students know, we've gone over it. Well, I will say, I have, at times with our kids, they know where the forms are in the office to come down if they want to report it. And then we have not gone through the entire policy with them yet. No, we've not.
Is that an option?
Yes.
For you to start with, grade school, start with the little ones, work your way up. It has to start somewhere.
So I just want to say that there's a lot of kids that I feel like at a very young age, it's happening a lot sooner, and I never expected that to happen. And it's really scary. It's such a young age when this occurring, and the negativity is not helpful. And I guess that kids just don't know. I think they're not really sure what the difference between bullying is because they're not trained. And I feel like if they were educated at a really young age, then maybe we wouldn't be dealing with this as middle school and high school. And so I don't know if there's any way for them to have like some type of understanding about what the difference between that is at a young age. Like, I don't know, role play, I'm not really sure if there is anything out there. But it's really hard to see when your child comes home really upset all the time. Especially when you just want them to be safe. And they're so nice and they don't understand that these children are being mean to them until you explain it to them. And they just say, they're just supposed to be having a bad day. They're just having a rough day and I wish I could make them feel better. And so, when your daughter comes home like that, it's just really heartbreaking. Especially in first grade.
Thank you for sharing that. So I think everybody in this room in our community agrees that the culture needs to change. And, we live in an exceptionally negative world now, exceptionally negative. And it's easy to learn bad behavior. We all know that. Now that the state of Maine has given this school district this tool to use, how are we going to track its success and or failures over the next year? Because I think one of the things that will help reinforce the success is to start putting some more positive things out. Of saying, we've got this protocol in place, it's working. And here's why we know it's working. That's what we need to start telling the community, is more positive things that is going to come from this.
And Kelly, you're absolutely right, and that goes beyond the walls of the school. It's social media, that's grown-ups in the community. I think all of us need to be focusing much more on the positive. You pick up the paper, I picked up the newspaper the other day, and I couldn't find a positive story in it.
Can't find it
and our kids are feeling that too. So the more that we can all do, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's acknowledging the good things that are happening, we need to always do a better job of selling our wares, letting people know what's going on. But we really need the help of the adults in the community to be adults and to foster positive opportunities for our kids. So that's one of the ways that folks can help us, and in turn, that'll give us, maybe and our kids, a little bit more enthusiasm about feeling as though they're accomplishing some things, rather than wondering, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? Are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the wrong thing? It's not just SAD 44. That's our society today. But it's an excellent point. I thank you for bringing it up. Sarah?
Nice add on to that real quick, Dave. I feel like, I think part of the problem with that I see as a community member, not with someone in the school, is like, I don't know how much interaction even parents and especially not parents have with the school district. And so most of the things people hear are negative. And I feel like, I know, a school is not set up to be a market, you're not a business, you're not out marketing for yourself. But I do think there has to be, I don't know how it happens, but more of just like what good things are happening at the school and getting those communicated to the public,
Right.
so that you can have the rest of us be your champions. I mean, like I went to the dinner, the Telstar, high school dinner, and that was great.
Yeah.
It was a big missed opportunity though in the middle of that to stop and introduce yourselves and say, this is the program, these are the great things that are happening at, the 4-H camp every day, and this, because like, then everyone in that room can now lead and reiterate those things to public. I feel like that the more you can educate the community on what's going on, the more we can continue to spread a positive.
Totally agree with you. And we're looking internally for ways that we can improve that, whether it's time or resources. To give you an example, just before the holidays, we had 8 teachers in our school district who became national board certified teachers.
Oh, yeah,
50 in the entire state of Maine, 8 from SAD 44. That's a story to be told, and it will be told, and you'll be reading about it hopefully in the paper. We've added a Facebook page, we've updated our website, we put articles out in the newspaper. We're going to continue to do that, and even with doing some of those kinds of things, there's still things that just get by people because everybody's busy. But I totally agree. The good things that are happening, we need to make sure people listen to them and hear them and understand them. And I would just say to anybody who's not a parent, get involved. We're happy to have you here as volunteers. If you're interested in helping us get the word out, there's ways that we can tap you to help us do that. Just coming tonight, that's huge, and we appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to do that. And hopefully, you'll see that the policy changes. You heard it tonight. We're not perfect on this. But hopefully now that this is all in place and we're using it, we can build a level of confidence that you can believe in. And a year from now, 2 years from now, things are going to happen faster and hopefully better. And maybe we have another meeting like this, and we check in and we say, okay, how are things going? And hopefully we can point to some progress. I want to give Sarah...
We used to have one of the strongest volunteer programs.
Oh, absolutely.
There were districts that were jealous of us because we had so much
Absolutely.
in a school from families, guardians, grandparents.
Yeah.
It just seems to me like that has...
people are busier.
Side.
Yeah.
A handful of us that still show up, but think about our days back in Preston.
Sure.
It's insane. We had so many volunteers, we didn't even know what to do with them.
We should have charged his admission. I want to give Sarah a chance to wrap things up, and I know there are some people that want to get to the game, and I'm not sure if it's still going on. I don't hear the bouncing of the ball anymore. But let's give Sarah a chance.
So just real quick, I just want to commend you all. This is fabulous. I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to be in Calais in a couple weeks talking to the high school there. I'm going to go to Caribou and talk to teachers there at that high school. I'm all over the state having these conversations, but this conversation is a little more unique. I think you guys have so many great ideas. This is recorded, so please go back and take notes because they have really good ideas, and they do as well. And so I do have a statewide perspective, and these folks are doing a good job. And And you guys are doing a good job as well. So just keep talking about it. It's really, really hard to have these conversations. And when your kids are coming home and talking to you, you gotta give yourself 2 thumbs up as a parent, because not all kids go home and talk to their parents. So thanks for being here.
Good. Sarah. And I know I just can't keep quiet, so I'm sorry for speaking so much, but I want to really thank Sarah for making the trek out, bringing her knowledge of what's happening across the state to us. And again, our administrators, teachers, putting a lot of time and effort into this. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to come out tonight. Stay in touch. Talk to your administrators, talk to your kids, help your kids at home recognize, what's teasing, what's bullying, those kinds of things, because you can help us a lot that way too. And, stay in touch. We'll do our best to stay in touch with you, and maybe, like I said, maybe a couple of years from now, we'll have another one of these meetings and just check in and see how things are going. And in the meantime, I just ask for your support and your involvement with your kids and our schools. Thanks again for coming tonight. Appreciate it.